November 17, 1944. Hürtgen Forest, Germany. The acrid scent of burned pine mingled with the metallic smell of dirty snow. Two American soldiers crouched motionless in their foxhole, breath forming white clouds in the frozen air. Private First Class James Mitchell held a 5-foot steel tube, simple as a plumber's pipe. His companion, Corporal Tom Henley, cradled a 60-millimeter rocket against his chest, trying to keep the battery warm beneath his coat. 200 meters ahead, three 45-ton Panthers rumbled through the trees with a deep, menacing growl. The German tanks were the most feared beasts on the Western Front. 80 millimeters of frontal armor sloped at 55 degrees, capable of destroying any American Sherman before it could fire back. And against them, Mitchell held what the Germans had begun calling with contempt the Clumsy tube, a pipe with rockets that looked too primitive to be real. The German Panther crews had first seen the bazooka months earlier in Normandy. Their initial reaction was disbelief followed by laughter. This was the American anti-tank weapon? A drainpipe? German engineers had spent years perfecting the 88mm Panzerschreck, copied from captured bazookas, but improved. Heavier, more powerful. The original M9A1 Bazooka, with its 2.36-inch bore, seemed like a toy by comparison. Stories circulated in German intelligence reports. In North Africa in 1942, the Americans had first deployed this curious weapon. Veteran Panzer Grenadiers from the Afrika Korps had examined it, shaken their heads. Misfiring rounds. Rockets that bounced off without exploding. Batteries that died in the cold. They had watched bazookas fire against the sides of Panzer IIIs and IVs, rockets that barely left scorch marks on the steel. American weapons, they scoffed, made by the nation that prefers quantity over quality. But what the Germans failed to understand initially was the revolutionary concept Mitchell held in his trembling hands. In May 1942, on a dusty proving ground at Aberdeen, Maryland, Lieutenant Edward Ewell had been walking past a scrap pile when he spotted a 60mm tube. "That's the answer," he had exclaimed. Together with Major Leslie Skinner, he had developed something that would transform infantry warfare, a launcher that allowed the rocket to complete its burn before leaving the tube, shielding the firer from the searing exhaust. It did not rely on high muzzle velocity or solid shot. The shaped charge, a simple yet brutal engineering innovation, created an instantaneous flame jet of tremendous intensity that burned through steel, turning the tank's interior into an inferno. 13 pounds of steel tube, 2 men, 300 yards of effective range. In the right hands, it could level the playing field against 50 tons of German steel. The Germans expected to face terrified infantry who would flee before the roar of their 680 horsepower Maybach engines. They had experienced that terror on the Eastern Front, had seen Soviet soldiers run with Molotov cocktails strapped to their chests, desperate. The Panther commanders in Hürtgen that November day anticipated another easy victory. Their frontal armor was virtually invulnerable to the bazooka. German manuals specified, keep the front toward the enemy, advance with infantry support. But in the dense Hürtgen woods, doctrines crumbled. The Panthers moved single file between narrow trees, their vulnerable sides exposed. A mere 40 to 50 millimeters of side armor, necessarily thin to reduce the tank's weight. Mitchell watched. He waited. His training came back to him. Words from the sergeant in England months ago. The Panther is invincible from the front, but it's a coffin from the side. 50 millimeters. The M6A3 rocket can penetrate 4 inches, 102 millimeters at any distance, at any angle up to 50 degrees from normal. The first Panther passed. The second. Mitchell could feel his pulse in his ears. The cold made the battery in his weapon unreliable. The manual warned that below 14 degrees Fahrenheit, the dry cells became too weak. That was why Henley had kept it against his body for the past half hour, rotating it with a spare battery in his pocket. The third Panther turned slightly, exposing its full broadside. 150 meters. Mitchell raised the tube to his shoulder. Henley slid the rocket inside, connected the wire trailing from the rocket's tail to the electrical contact. "Ready," he whispered. Mitchell aligned the optical ring sight, graduations from 50 to 700 yards in 50-yard increments. He chose 150. He squeezed the squeezer-type trigger. The magneto, new on the M9A1 model introduced in September, replacing the problematic batteries of the earlier M1, generated the spark. The rocket burst forward with a roar, leaving a smoke trail. 0.02 of a second of combustion. No flash. The rocket cut through the frozen air. The impact was like contained thunder. The flame jet penetrated the Panther's side armor, expanding in a 90-degree cone inside the fighting compartment. Particles of steel and projectile, heated to incandescence, flew inward. Stored ammunition detonated. The Panther's turret lifted slightly as orange flames erupted from the hatches. The tank stopped, its right track still spinning uselessly. The other two Panthers wheeled sharply, their commanders now understanding the mortal danger hidden in the woods. But other bazooka teams waited for them. In 90 seconds, all three steel giants burned. The crews who managed to escape ran through the trees, leaving behind the machines in which they had trusted so completely. At German regimental headquarters that evening, reports cascaded in. This was not the first such incident. Across the Western Front, from Normandy to the Vosges, Panther crews returned. Those who returned at all, with similar stories. The American Clumsy tube was not clumsy at all. It was destroying Panthers, Panzer IVs, even the occasional Tigers, from well-executed ambushes. What the Germans had not anticipated was the American willingness to close the distance, to wait until angles were perfect, to strike vulnerable points with surgical precision. American training manuals now circulated among captured German units, diagrams showing exactly where to aim, sides, rear, engine decks. The psychological advantage of the Panzer was evaporating. One captured Panther commander would later confess to interrogators, "We stopped thinking of ourselves as invincible when we realized that every bush, every building corner, every pile of rubble could hide two Americans with that tube. You could not see them until it was too late. The frontal armor meant nothing when they simply waited for your side." The transformation in German tactical doctrine was immediate and telling. By December 1944, during the Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, German operational orders emphasized: keep infantry close to tanks at all times, especially in wooded or urban terrain. But the realities of winter warfare made this nearly impossible. Panthers continued advancing down the narrow Ardennes roads, their sides exposed, and American bazooka teams, now mostly equipped with the improved M9A1, waited for them. Corporal Albert Dargaud of the 143rd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion destroyed 2 German tanks with his bazooka during the Battle of the Bulge, waiting until they were less than 100 meters before firing. The courage required was extraordinary, to remain still while 50 tons of lethal steel advanced directly toward you. Throughout the conflict, the bazooka became a symbol of something deeper than American innovation. It embodied the democratic American spirit of war, the belief that individual intelligence and courage could overcome technological superiority. While Germany poured massive resources into creating ever heavier, more complex tanks, the 77-ton Tiger II, with its 180mm frontal armor, America bet on arming every infantry platoon with a simple yet lethal weapon that could be operated by 2 ordinary men with basic training. Lieutenant Colonel Edward Ewell would later recall, "We have gotten into the bad habit of heaping people onto projects. The trap we've fallen into is to believe that 1,000 incompetents properly organized can do the job of a few dozen outstanding people." The bazooka was the product of exactly that, a few brilliant minds working quickly, without bureaucracy. From initial concept in May 1942 to mass production in 30 days. General Electric delivered 5,000 launchers, with 89 minutes to spare. By war's end, 440,000 bazookas had reached the field. The Germans responded by copying the design with the Panzerschreck, making it bigger, heavier, more Germanically over-engineered. But they missed the point. The genius of the bazooka lay not in its raw power, but in its simplicity, portability, and in the confidence it gave the common infantryman. They were no longer tank victims. They were tank hunters. In the Hürtgen woods that November day, as Mitchell and Henley watched the Panther burn, they understood something no manual could ever teach. Smoke spiraled upward in black columns against the gray winter sky. The steel tube in Mitchell's hands was still warm. 300 meters away, the once invincible Panther lay motionless, its frontal armor, so carefully designed, so confidently relied upon, irrelevant on the actual terrain of combat where sides and rear always eventually became exposed. The weapon the Germans had dismissed as clumsy and primitive had just proven an eternal truth of warfare. Victory belongs not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable, the most courageous, to those who understand that technology without tactics is just metal waiting to be melted. General Dwight Eisenhower would later call the bazooka one of the tools of victory. But for Mitchell, Henley, and thousands of American infantrymen like them who faced German armor with little more than a tube and their courage, it was not just a tool. It was proof that democratic ingenuity, the ability to innovate rapidly, to trust the individual, to adapt doctrine on the fly, could overcome even the most formidably armed enemy. The Panthers kept coming through the winter of 1944, and bazooka teams kept waiting for them in every forest, every village, every crossroads. The clumsy tube had become the Panther's nightmare. In the bitter cold of that November afternoon, as light faded over Hürtgen and smoke from the destroyed Panther drifted on the winter wind, it had become clear that German laughter had been silenced forever. The simple American tube, born from necessity, perfected through urgency, and wielded with extraordinary courage, had rewritten the rules of tank combat, not through armor superiority or firepower, but through the understanding that in war, as in democracy itself, final victory belongs to those who empower the ordinary individual to perform extraordinary acts.